that has left the political process polarized. Well, joining me now to take stock of the situation is Taufiq Rahim, a political analyst and the director of GlobeSight. Taufiq, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Omar.
Thank you very much for being with us. So I guess to start things off, I'd love to hear your perspective on Egypt. 2 years on, obviously, from the revolution. What do you see in terms of progress and obviously the challenges that remain?
Right. I think, from some of the cynics' point of view, you might say that there is a change at the top and not much else. I think the more realistic view is there have been some shifts in terms of having a new constitution, even if it's imperfect, having some of the members of the former regime put on trial and some of them on retrial to hold them to account for the past 30 years or more even for different actions. And you do have, I think, a spirit of openness in discussion. But fundamentally what has not changed yet, and I think you pointed that out in the introduction, are the economic conditions in the country on one hand, and on the other hand, there is a renewed sense that the media is coming under increased scrutiny by the new leadership, with presenters being put into the court process, the legal process, for types of reporting they're doing, changes in the leadership in, for example, newspapers like Ahram, and people don't know where that came from, whether it is just on editorial or if it is something more political. So there's a tremendous sense of apprehension right now in Egypt.
I guess looking at maybe an aspect of that, looking of course at President Morsi,
Yeah.
He's had a very interesting year in 2012. I mean, certainly he came in I think with quite optimistic feelings, backing him, that he was there to help consolidate, bring things together to create the unity in Egypt. And of course, towards the end of the year, we saw I guess, faux pas with the
Sure.
sweeping presidential powers, the
Sure.
controversy over the Constitution, the ongoing difficulties, and in fact, an increasingly polarized political process. Why do you think we've seen that transition? And is it something where his strategy has fallen apart? Is it something with maybe his intentions, the Brotherhood's intentions coming more to the front? What do you think?
Well, I think, objectively speaking, they definitely have looked to consolidate their power and pursue their own agenda in keeping with the view that they feel this is what many Egyptians want to see. And they would point out to the fact that 63% of Egyptians voted for the constitution, albeit with a low turnout, as evidence of that. However, there are shifts from their previous stances. And one of the things that's clearest in that view is their close relationship with the United States, and in some way a tacit détente with Israel. You don't see the aggressive rhetoric towards it, even though that was such a central part of Morsi's platform before the Muslim Brotherhood took power. And I think we have to point out, power changes parties and power changes politicians. And I think that's what we've seen with Mohammed Morsi and the Brotherhood, that instead of having a more conciliatory approach when they thought they needed to co-govern, when they realized they could simply have their agenda and govern exclusively on that, they have much more of a, invite but not necessarily necessitate the involvement of other factions. And we just saw a number of churches, for example, leave the quote-unquote national dialogue that Morsi had set up, which means that many Egyptians are not seeing him as an inclusive leader as well.
I mean, I guess then when do you reach the point where, the situation on the ground, the situation even for the average person, even for the Morsi
Right.
supporter has gone too far? Obviously, we were discussing a little bit about the economic challenges.
Sure,
and obviously there's a lot of talk about this IMF loan, which is they've continuously delayed because of these political I guess, disputes within Egypt. When does it reach that breaking point? How much goodwill can he really bank on?
Well, I definitely think they have to accelerate that loan process in the first quarter of this year. I think it's becoming a very critical issue for the country. And people actually are surprised that it hasn't reached a breaking point until now. I think politically the breaking point will be when the electorate goes to polls for the new parliament. And we'll see if the population endorses, once again, the Freedom and Justice Party in the parliamentary elections. Because there is this view that is out there that Morsi only received less than a quarter of the votes in the first round of the presidential elections. And that's really the support for the Brotherhood, even though they had the majority of seats in the first parliamentary elections. So we'll see there the level of dissatisfaction that people have with the economic situation. And I think the patience is wearing out for there to be any change If it doesn't come soon, people say, well, it's not coming. Before people, maybe in 2012, were willing to give Mohamed Morsi a pass, let's say the mainstream of Egyptians, working class Egyptians, to say, okay, he needs to resolve the political situation. Now that's happened. So people are going to be waiting to see results now, and not waiting too long to see those.
I mean, again, I guess looking at the 2-year mark for the Arab Spring in general, looking at other nations, there have been many people in the past who have said that democracy, quote unquote, isn't right for the Arab world. Right. 2 years down the road for Egypt, of course longer for Tunisia, we're still seeing, I guess, challenges when it comes to a consolidated and as effective and representative democratic process.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on this? I mean, how would you compare, I guess, Tunisia to Egypt? Why do you think it's been such a rushed transition?
Right.
Is 2 years long enough to judge anything?
So we have 4 countries that underwent a revolution, which are Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, and of course Yemen, in which the heads of state actually were deposed from power. And in all those countries, you have middling levels of success. There has been no complete transition, mind transformation. But I think if we look historically to many countries, revolutions never lead to those results within the first couple of years. What we find in Tunisia is that despite some setbacks, there still is positive momentum and an inclusive system that is involving a pluralistic set of parties. In Yemen, there was never a complete revolution, and they continue to try to remove many of the relatives of Ali Abdullah Saleh from different positions. And of course, in Libya, you have the security situation that is always tense. And we just talked about Egypt. So the verdict is definitely out, but I think it's much too early to deliver any type of decision on whether democracy could be a success for the region or not. That being said, I think all indications point to the vast majority of Arab citizens wanting to have more inclusiveness in the political system, wanting to have more participation, wanting to have more of a voice. And whatever genie was out of the bottle, I think it's never going back in. That door has now been open, and you see every country, including the Gulf, saying, how do we interact with their citizens? How do we deliver effective policy? And what we're gravitating more towards, I think 2 years on from the Arab awakening, is less about when do I get to vote, and more about what is my government doing for me? What is the policy that it's delivering? How can I see change over time? And if I'm not seeing that positive change, whether it's a democratic system or an undemocratic system, the barometer of which things are being measured by is precisely that, and not who's in charge.
Absolutely. Well, it seems that certainly democracy is here to stay in the region. It's a very, well, we'll hope to see positive momentum in that regard.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Always.
Taufiq, thank you so much for being with
Thank
us.
you.
Pleasure. We are going to take a